Welcome, dear friends of Secrets Behind the Stars. You're in the right place for deep dives, candid analysis, and those heartfelt revelations that make us rethink what we believe we know about the glittering world on our screens. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, give this video a like, and if you want to support the work we do every day, hit the subscribe/cattle button to join our community that grows with new voices, new stories, and new perspectives with every sunrise. Today, we open a chapter that has rattled the Turkish entertainment scene in a way few expected. The spotlight falls on the couple that many considered unshakable, Gawkberg Yıldırım and Semra Arda. Known for their elegance, discipline, and nearly flawless public image, they've rarely invited controversy. But this week, Gawkberg decided to break the silence with a confession that stunned both their admirers and their colleagues. In a voice stripped of bravado and stripped of defense, he admitted, almost as if speaking to himself, he had made the greatest error of his life. What followed was not a scandal, but something more disarming, a raw unveiling of the inner battles he has carried through years of set work, public expectations, and a high-pressure environment where sincerity is often read as provocation. For the first time, he offered a look behind the curtain. He spoke about misread intentions, unspoken rivalries, the slow erosion of trust when whispered rumors outpace the truth. He talked about how a smile can be taken as complacency, how assertiveness can be branded as rebellion, and how a hasty judgment can turn into a label that sticks. Beside him, quietly present, was Semra Arda, navigating the same maze, trying to keep their shared life grounded. The couple that people love to describe as luminous was suddenly revealing the shadows that trail behind the light. To many, Gawkberg has always been the consummate professional, polished on screen, studied off screen, endlessly respectful. And Semra, with her steadiness, her calm, and that subtle strength that speaks louder than noise, has long been the anchor in their story. Yet beneath the glossy image of perfection, the two have weathered frictions that most never see. Confusing alliances, shifting loyalties, and situations where saying nothing seemed safer than defending the truth. When he explained that being frank, being open, and holding back when he felt wronged had formed the core of his greatest missteps, he wasn't seeking pity. He was naming the paradox that many in this industry navigate, how virtues can look like liabilities when filtered through competitive eyes. Then came the line that set social networks ablaze. He described a world where candor is treated as a misfit guest, where the straightforward are quickly mistaken for the difficult, and where resilience often blurs with resignation. It wasn't bitterness. It was a stark observation from someone who's lived the cost of honesty. The entertainment sphere can feel like a labyrinth built of favors traded in silence, a place where perception is currency, and a person's standing can be chipped away by the gentle, constant drip of invented narratives. The competition isn't only for roles, it's also a battle over identity, over who gets to define whom. What about you? Do you think an actor or actress has to bend the truth of who they are just to stay afloat? Or is refusing to bend the only way to keep one's dignity intact? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. Here at Secrets Behind the Stars, we read them carefully, because your insight helps us see angles we might miss. Among everything he said, the sentence that carved the deepest groove in the conversation was this: maybe choosing this path was the first wrong turn. Hearing that from a performer who has built a career on discipline and devotion shocked many. Yet, in that admission was a clear signal to the next generation: skill alone doesn't carry you through the storm. Hard work doesn't immunize you from unforeseen currents. You need the fine art of understanding people, the courage to defend yourself when you're tired of fighting, and the wisdom to step back before a manipulated rumor becomes your permanent shadow. It didn't take long for the confession to ripple across the internet. Waves of support followed. There were messages saluting his courage, notes applauding the honesty of a man who refused to varnish his story, and heartfelt words for Semra, whose quiet steadfastness has become, in many eyes, a symbol of strength. People wrote that the cost of being decent shouldn't be exile from fairness. Others said that his vulnerability felt like a truth many have been waiting to hear from those who seem untouchable. For hours, their names floated across platforms, not as idle gossip, but as a rallying cry for transparency in an industry that often polishes the surface while hiding the strain beneath. Within that tide of discussion, one piece of his reflection drew the most debate. He described how, on certain sets, His directness and desire to ask questions were interpreted as arrogance or defiance, especially when timelines were tight and egos were tender. The moment he stopped nodding politely and started asking for clarity, he became the problem. He said something simple but piercing. By refusing to hide his straightforwardness, he may have walked himself into storms that could have been avoided. And yet, if he had played along, who would he have been by the end? This is the knot so many performers try to untangle. Is survival a matter of playing a part off-screen, too? Or does wearing a mask to work eventually erase you? We're asking you as part of this conversation, what matters more in an actor's life, authenticity or prudence? Is there a middle ground where a person can stay true and still protect themselves from needless harm? Write to us below. Your experiences and judgments give meaning to discussions like this. The couple describes another dimension that often stays out of focus, the weight of media pressure and the peculiar alchemy of social platforms, where a clipped sentence takes on a life of its own. An offhand comment, severed from its context, can be spun into scandal by those who profit from outrage. They've seen unverified items slip into the bloodstream of public talk, watched as a story grows legs and runs, while the truth struggles to catch its breath. Those waves of invention affect sleep, work, the energy you bring to a new script, even the silence you share at home after a grueling day. Fans, recognizing the pattern, responded with frustration, asking why the institutions that thrive on stars cannot also protect them when it matters most. And what about the relationship at the center? Semra's presence in all this has not been ornamental. She has been the witness, the confidant, the challenger who asks the hard questions, and the shelter where the noise finally fades. Those close to the couple say that when the pressure spiked, she urged reflection rather than retaliation, guided him toward choosing steadiness over spectacle. In private, she reminded him that their home isn't a press room, it's the place where their real lives breathe, a world that doesn't need applause to be meaningful. That balance, of unflinching realism and deep loyalty, has held them together when the narrative tried to pull them apart. Still, neither is eager to play the victim. Gawkberg was clear, he has learned from each misstep, including the idealism that sometimes left him exposed. He doesn't intend to trade his identity for the comfort of being misunderstood less. He'd rather find new ways to work, to choose his projects more carefully, to build circles where trust isn't a slogan but a practice. He spoke with a tempered resolve. Perhaps he had been too transparent, but the lessons forged in that openness will be the foundation of the next chapter. It wasn't a triumphant promise, it was steadier than that, the sound of someone committing to a long path rather than a dramatic gesture. Hearing him say all this, you could feel how the conversation became more than a personal confession. It is, in its essence, a mirror held up to an industry that thrives on mystery and polish. Why do the whispers travel faster than facts? Why is it so hard to say, we got this wrong, when a rumor is proven false? Why is a human being, whose job is to feel deeply in front of a lens, expected to be resistant to the very storms those feelings invite? The questions don't have quick answers, but they deserve to be spoken aloud. And let's not forget the many who are just now stepping onto their first set, carrying a head full of dreams. For them, the message from this story is not to be afraid of the craft, but to understand the territory. You need talent, yes. You need endurance, of course. But you also need to read the room, recognize patterns, and know how to build emotional armor that doesn't harden you into someone you don't recognize. Find mentors who don't need you to flatter them. Learn to document your work, your efforts, your contributions, because in the fog of a crowded production, a clear record is sometimes your only lighthouse. And when a misunderstanding blooms into a narrative, remember that silence is not always surrender, but it isn't always wisdom either. In the midst of everything, the public response brought tangible comfort. Messages arrived saying that they admired the forthrightness, that courage isn't loud but faithful. People reminded the couple that what lasts is not a headline but a body of work, a way of treating others, a devotion to craft that cannot be faked. Some were angry on their behalf, frustrated by the way media storms form and dissipate without anyone taking responsibility. Others simply thanked them for letting the curtain slip just enough to show the human cost of being endlessly watched. The path ahead remains uncertain, but it is not bleak. The couple has chosen to move forward without trading away their names for approval. They're rethinking which scripts to accept, which conversations deserve a response, which rooms feel aligned with who they are. This isn't withdrawal, it's a recalibration. The same dedication that took them this far will carry them further, only now it's tempered with hard-earned wisdom. As we close this chapter, one resolve echoes most clearly. He may have paid a price for truthfulness, but he believes he can rebuild from that very place. It's not the defiant vow of someone spoiling for a fight. It's the quiet determination of a person who knows that staying himself is the only way he can keep doing this work and still recognize the man in the mirror when the lights go out. Beside him, Semra remains the calm current that steadies his steps, the reminder that love doesn't need a camera to prove it's real. So now, we turn the question to you. How do you read this moment in their journey? Have you seen or lived stories where honesty seemed to complicate everything, and yet, in the long run, guarded what truly mattered? Tell us below. Your perspective shapes the conversations we have here, and it helps us all understand the unseen edges of a world we think we know. Don't leave without joining our community. Subscribe to Secrets Behind the Stars, tap that bell so you don't miss what's coming next, and if you wish to help us grow, click the cattle button to support the channel. Share your thoughts about which actors, actresses, and public figures you want us to talk about in upcoming videos. Until then, we'll keep bringing you stories that uncover what's hidden, illuminate what's complicated, and honor the humanity behind the spotlight, only here on Secrets Behind the Stars.